Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and secure the compensation you deserve.
Ever had one of those days, where you're just doing your job, same as always, and then wham, something totally unexpected happens, like you get hurt on the job?
Oh, absolutely. It's something you never really think about until it happens to you or someone you know.
Exactly. And it makes you realize just how important it is to be prepared, legally speaking. That's why we're doing this deep dive today, all about workers' compensation.
It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I think a lot of people have questions about.
For sure. And to help us unpack all of this, we're tapping into some insights from Foyle Legal.
They've got a great website that breaks down these complex issues into, plain English.
Seriously. They lay out all the need-to-know info about your rights if you ever find yourself facing a workplace injury.
Because let's face it, dealing with an injury is stressful enough, right? The last thing you want is to be wading through legal jargon on top of everything else.
Preach. So Foyle Legal kicks things off with the basics.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does workers' comp cover here? And get this, it's not just like your typical construction site accidents or anything.
Right. It's actually way more comprehensive than a lot of folks realize.
Seriously, we're talking slips and falls, repetitive strain injuries, even stuff like psychological stress. It all falls under this umbrella.
And it's interesting, even farm injuries, which often get overlooked, are covered under workers' comp.
Really? I had no idea.
It's true. And it just goes to show you how many workers here are actually eligible for these benefits.
That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to assume it only applies to certain industries, but clearly that's not the case at all.
Nope, not at all. And that's why understanding the specifics of your situation, your injury, your work environment, all of that is absolutely crucial.
So it's not as simple as, I got hurt at work, therefore I automatically qualify.
Exactly. There's definitely more to it than that, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's dig into some of those specifics then. Foyle Legal's website actually does a great job of breaking down the different injury types. They even use some pretty vivid examples to illustrate, which I have to say really caught my eye.
Yeah, I think those examples are so important because they really help people visualize just how varied these situations can be,
Totally. It's one thing to talk about it abstractly, but when you hear about these real-life scenarios, it really hits home.
And it highlights why a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work when it comes to workers' comp claims.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the claims process itself. What are some of the key things someone should know before they even think about filing a claim?
Well, first and foremost, understanding the timeline is absolutely critical.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Reporting your injury promptly is non-negotiable. I can't stress that enough. Delaying the reporting process, even if you think your injury is super minor, can really come back to bite you later on.
Gotcha. But why the urgency? What difference does a few days make?
It all boils down to establishing a clear link between your injury and your work environment. Insurers, rightfully so, need to be able to verify that the incident actually occurred on the job. And the longer you wait, the harder that becomes to prove.
So it's kind of like a race against time to gather evidence and make sure your claim is rock solid.
Precisely.
Makes sense. And speaking of evidence, I noticed that Foyle Legal really hammers home the importance of documentation.
Oh, for sure. Documentation is your best friend throughout this entire process.
Okay, but what does that mean, documentation? Like, what kind of stuff should I be keeping track of?
We're talking detailed records of everything, the date and time of the incident, obviously, what you were doing at the time, the specific circumstances that led up to the injury.
Right.
And don't forget things like, were you wearing any specific gear? Was there any equipment involved?
What about witnesses?
Yes.
Yeah.
If there were any witnesses, try to get their contact info, even if it's just a quick exchange. You never know what details might be helpful later on.
Wow, it's starting to feel like a full-on workplace injury investigation.
In a way, it is. You're building a case, basically, to make sure you receive the benefits you deserve.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about reporting the injury, gathering evidence. What about the benefits themselves? What should people know about what they might be entitled to?
Right. So Foyle Legal stresses that it's super important to understand the full scope of those potential benefits because it's not just about covering those initial medical bills,
Yeah, I was wondering about that. What else is there?
We're talking lost wages, for one, potentially even rehabilitation costs, ongoing care if your injury requires it, This is where things can get a little complicated, especially when it comes to calculating the long-term impact on your ability to earn a living.
And that's where I imagine things can get, a little tricky with the insurance company.
You're telling me this is where having a crystal clear understanding of your rights and the potential pitfalls becomes absolutely vital.
Okay, I'm sensing a but coming.
And this brings us to what I think is a real game changer, something that Foyle Legal really highlights on their website: common law claims.
Common law claims.
Yeah.
Okay, now you're just using fancy legal terms that I don't understand. Break it down for me. What are these claims and why should I care?
Okay, so imagine this. Your employer's negligence, their actions or inactions, directly contributed to your injury. Maybe they ignored safety protocols, provided faulty equipment, something along those lines. Common law means you could potentially be entitled to way more than just those basic workers' comp benefits.
Wait, really?
We're talking potential lawsuits for pain and suffering, lost earning capacity. It's a whole other ballgame.
Oh, okay. That's huge. So knowing about these common law claims could be the difference between a fair settlement and being severely shortchanged.
You hit the nail on the head. And that's just one example of why having a solid grasp of the ins and outs of workers' comp is so important. This stuff can get complicated fast. And unfortunately, not everyone out there is playing fair.
So we've talked about knowing your rights, all the ins and outs, the potential pitfalls. But what happens when you're actually ready to settle that claim? Foyle Legal is really clear that this is not something to take lightly.
Oh, absolutely not. This is a huge decision, and it can have some major consequences down the line if you're not careful. Essentially, when you settle, you're basically saying, okay, I'm done. No more claims related to this injury.
So I'm signing away any chance to get more compensation later on, even if something unexpected comes up.
Exactly. You're saying you're good with what you've got, and you're not coming back for more, which is fine if your injury is totally resolved.
Right, but what if it's not? What if things turn out to be worse than you initially thought?
That's exactly why this decision is so critical, and that's where those common law claims we touched on earlier come into play.
Oh, right. Okay, remind me again, why are those so important when it comes to settling?
Because settling too soon could mean you're leaving a lot of money on the table, especially if you later find out that, say, your employer's negligence was a bigger factor in your injury than you initially realized.
Oof. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about the here and now, it's about protecting yourself in the long run, too.
100%. And that's why Foyle Legal is such a big advocate for getting legal advice before you even think about signing a settlement agreement.
See, now that's where I always get a little skeptical. It sounds like a lawyer trying to drum up business,
Yeah.
Like, oh, you need me, gotta hire me.
I get it. I totally do. It's easy to think that way. But here's the thing. The insurance company. They've got a whole team of lawyers on their side, looking out for their bottom line. Don't you deserve to have someone in your corner too? Someone who knows the law inside and out and is fighting for your best interests.
Okay, I see your point. But what about those free legal resources that are out there? Are those not enough?
They're definitely a good starting point, don't get me wrong. But nothing, and I mean nothing, beats having an experienced professional who's dealt with workers' comp cases day in and day out. They can spot those red flags in a settlement offer that you might miss. They know how to negotiate for the best possible outcome.
Yeah, I can see how that would be worth the investment, especially when it's something as important as your health and your livelihood.
Exactly. And it's interesting. Foyle Legal actually mentions this no win, no fee option.
No win, no fee. What's that all about?
It basically means you don't pay your lawyer unless they actually get you some compensation. So you're not out any money if they don't win your case.
Wow, okay, so there's really no risk for the injured worker. That's pretty
No.
amazing. It makes getting legal help a lot more accessible.
Right. And that's the goal, to make sure everyone has access to quality legal representation, regardless of their financial situation.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of getting legal advice before settle. But what about while your claim is still, in progress? What can people do to be proactive about protecting their rights throughout the process?
And this is where that whole being your own best advocate thing comes in.
Okay, but how do I actually do that?
Well, remember how we talked about how important it is to act fast and document everything?
Yeah.
That's not just about filing the paperwork on time. It's about building a solid, unshakable foundation for your entire claim. You're basically creating a clear record of what happened, when it happened, and how it happened.
Right, so that if there's any dispute later on, you've got the evidence to back up your side of the story.
Exactly. And it's not always about some big conspiracy or anything. Sometimes it's just about those little details, those seemingly insignificant things that can make a big difference in the long run.
Okay, so if I'm someone who's just been injured on the job, what kind of things should I be documenting?
Everything and anything you can think of. Seriously, write it down, take pictures, whatever you need to do. The date and time of the incident, obviously, where it happened, what you were doing, what equipment was involved, if any.
Or what you were wearing?
Oh, absolutely. That's important too. And don't forget, if there were any witnesses at all, even if it was just someone who was passing by, try to get their contact information.
Gotcha. So it's all about being meticulous and creating that clear, detailed record. But what about the fear of retaliation? Something I hear a lot about. People are scared of losing their jobs if they report an injury.
And it's a valid fear for sure. Nobody wants to get on their employer's bad side, especially when their job is on the line. But here's the thing. Retaliation for reporting a workplace injury is illegal.
Okay, so it's against the law. But that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't happen, does it?
Unfortunately, you're right. And that's another area where having a lawyer on your side can be a huge asset. It can help you navigate those potentially tricky conversations with your employer, make sure you're protected, and ensure you're not being treated unfairly.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the ins and outs of workers' comp, the different types of injuries, the claims process, those common law claims. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And I think it highlights just how important it is to be informed, to understand your rights and what resources are available to you.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest takeaways for me has been the importance of being proactive.
100%. You really can't just sit back and wait for things to happen. You've got to be your own advocate throughout the entire process, from the moment you're injured to the final settlement.
And that starts with, like we talked about, reporting the injury right away,
Yeah.
documenting everything, and seriously considering getting legal advice.
Exactly. Those are the things that are going to make the biggest difference in the long run. And remember, knowledge is power, but only if you actually use it.
Well said. So for our listener out there who might be dealing with all of this right now, maybe they just got hurt on the job or they're in the middle of dealing with a claim.
Wow.
What's the one piece of advice you would give them?
Don't wait. Whatever it is you're thinking about doing, whether it's making that call to a lawyer or just sitting down and writing down everything you remember about your injury, take that step today. Don't put it off. Because the sooner you act, the better your chances of a positive outcome.
Action over inaction. I love it. All right, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into workers' comp. We hope you found this information helpful. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are resources out there and people who can help you navigate this often confusing system. Until next time, stay informed, stay safe, and stay empowered.
Thanks for tuning in to Personal Injury Claims, explained by Foyle Legal. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes and isn't legal advice. For advice specific to your situation, visit us at Foyle Legal. And don't forget to subscribe or leave a review.